Welcome back, everybody, to Slack Signal X. So, sometimes you reach a point in life and there's this unique kind of regret that doesn't come from doing the wrong things. It comes from doing what you thought was right for so long that by the time you finally stop and look around, the life you were supposedly protecting has already moved on without you. And that's the kind of hurt that sticks around. It's not the regret of some obvious disaster, not the kind where you can point to one stupid decision and say, well, there it is, that's where I blew it. That's the fork in the road where I took a hard left into my own destruction. I mean, I've got a couple of those too, but that's not the point. But before we get into this, you know the routine. Like, subscribe, and don't be a poser. I'm talking about the slower, simmering kind of regret, the kind that evolves from work schedules, commutes, responsibilities, and justifications, and every other respectable way a person can slowly disappear from his own life while telling himself that he's doing it for all the right reasons. For years, I thought I was doing what a father was supposed to do, working long hours, tattooing, driving an hour each way into Hartford from the other side of Connecticut. Putting in the time, bringing home decent money, keeping things stable, and doing what I thought a grown person was supposed to do if he wanted to call himself dependable. 2 hours in the car every day, then a full day in the shop, then drive home. Wake up, coffee, highway, tattoo, highway, repeat. I was gone so much that my daughter was heading off to school while I was waking up, and by the time I got home at night, she was already in bed. That was life. Not for some temporary rough patch, not for one of those seasons you swear you'll push through and then make up for later. That was just the structure of my life. That was the deal. That was what providing looked like, and I believed in it. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I truly believed that if I worked hard enough and stayed steady enough and kept the money coming in, that it counted for something. I believed that if my family had a stable home, the bills were paid, the heat stayed on, and there was food in the house, then I was doing what I was supposed to do. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not gracefully, but honestly, honorably, like a man who understood what his job was. And the truth is, part of me is still proud of that. I'm proud I could provide a stable home. I'm proud I got up and did it. I'm proud I wasn't one more guy drifting in and out of his kid's life with excuses and broken promises. I took the responsibility seriously. I worked. I made money in a trade and used it to keep my family afloat. That part is real. But another part of this story is real too. I was drinking too much during most of those years. Not in some crazy throw bottles through the windows way. Unfortunately, that came years later. Just the kind of drinking that quietly colonizes your life. The kind that becomes part of the architecture. It's functional and normalized. It doesn't blow the house up right away, but slowly takes away whatever isn't already being eaten up by work. If tattooing got the productive hours, drinking sort of got the rest of me. It got the evenings, it got the edges of the day, it got whatever energy, attention, patience, and clarity might have been left over after work. So when I say I wasn't present, I don't just mean I was physically gone a lot. I mean, even when I was technically there, I wasn't always all the way there. I was tired, distracted, I was drinking, I was running on routine and stress, and whatever story I needed to tell myself to keep the whole machine from collapsing. That's the part that's harder to admit because it means work doesn't get to be the sole villain in this story. And somewhere in the middle of all that, my daughter's childhood kept moving. That's the thing about kids. They don't wait around for you to figure yourself out. They don't freeze in place until your schedule opens up, or you finally get your drinking under control, or you become the version of yourself you kept promising that you'll become once life settles down. They just keep growing. They keep changing. They keep becoming themselves in real time, whether you're fully there to witness it or not. And most of the time, you don't feel that happening. That's the trick. If the loss came with a siren, maybe more of us would wake up. If there was some alarm that went off every time you traded a week of your life for survival and called it adulthood, maybe we'd stop and ask better questions. If somebody could tap you on the shoulder in the middle of a normal Tuesday and say, hey, just so you know, the version of your daughter who still lives in this house and still needs you in these specific ordinary ways is disappearing in real time. Maybe you'd find a way to stay home. or at least find a way to be more awake while you were there. But that's not how it works. It doesn't feel like you're losing anything while you're losing it. It feels like you're handling your business, and that's why it's so dangerous. A lot of bad decisions come with obvious warning labels. Affairs, gambling, getting high in the bathroom at work, disappearing for 3 days. Those at least announce themselves. They show up looking like trouble and kick the front door in and wreck the place. Obvious things you can't ignore. But overwork doesn't look like trouble. Overwork looks like discipline. It looks like maturity. It looks like a person doing what they have to do. So does grinding yourself into dust. So does a brutal commute. So does missing dinner because you booked another appointment. So does coming home exhausted and pouring a drink because you feel like you've earned it. And so does telling yourself this is just what adulthood feels like. A lot of us don't wreck our lives because we're reckless. We wreck parts of them because we're trying so hard to be responsible that we stop noticing what responsibility is costing us. And I think that's what eats at me now. Not some fantasy that I should have quit my job and run barefoot through the meadow with my kid every afternoon. I am a realist. I'm not rewriting my life into some inspirational movie where all my problems disappear because I chose presents over money and somehow the mortgage got magically paid. That's not how it works. The hours were necessary. The money mattered. The stability mattered. I'm not going to lie about that just because regret makes a cleaner story. I don't think I would go back and change the basic fact that I worked hard to provide for my family. I don't think I would. That's the strange part. That's the part that makes this hard to talk about. Because it would be so much easier if I could just say I was wrong. I should have done the opposite, end of story. But I don't believe that. I know what the bills were. I know what adulthood costs. I know what it means to be responsible for other people. I know why I got in the car and drove to Hartford every day. I know why I kept taking appointments. And I know why I said I'd slow down later and why I drank every day. None of it's mysterious to me. That's what makes the grief so weird. It's not grief over a life I obviously shouldn't have lived. It's grief over the cost of the life I did live. And by the time I fully understood that cost, the clock had already run most of the way down. During lockdown, like a lot of people, I had one of those moments where the noise got low enough for me to hear my own thoughts. And I'm not turning this into a COVID essay because it's not that. COVID wasn't the point. It was just the interruption. The machine stalled out for a second, and in that silence, I looked around and saw the shape of my own life more clearly than I probably ever had. By then I was divorced. My daughter was a senior in high school, basically grown up. And that's the part that hit me hardest. Like the ugly, quiet realization that the years I'd been sacrificing in the name of stability weren't sitting in some account waiting to be returned to me with interest. They were gone. The mornings, the dinners, ordinary nights, stupid little moments that don't seem important until they're the only things you want back. They were all gone. And the version of my daughter I would have spent them with was gone too. I mean, she was still here, still alive, still my daughter. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, the child version of her was gone. The little kid, the middle school version. The one who was becoming herself while I was hungover on Interstate 84, convincing myself I was doing all this for her anyway. The one who still lived with me in our house. The one who still had a whole childhood ahead of her. That girl was gone. And no amount of clarity in 2020 was going to bring that back. By the time I looked up, she was grown. That sentence sounds simple, but it has so much weight. Because it isn't just about age. It's about realizing you can miss a life without ever technically leaving it. You can be in the house and still not fully be there. You can be a provider and still feel absent. You can love your kid and still have huge pieces of her childhood blur past because you were exhausted or drunk or driving to work or stuck in a trance of trying to survive your own brain. That's the kind of thing nobody really teaches you how to mourn. There's no pamphlet for that. Nobody brings over a cake because you suddenly understand at 45 that time was the real currency all along, and you spent too much of it trying to earn money. There's no Hallmark card for realizing that being a good provider and being a present father are not always the same thing, and that sometimes one can actually cannibalize the other. So you just carry it around. You carry the pride and the guilt at the same time, the gratitude and the grief. You carry the knowledge that you did what you thought you had to do, and the knowledge that it still costs something precious. That's adulthood, I guess. Contradiction. I used to think earning money was my role, not because I was greedy, not because I was chasing status or trying to become some kind of like mogul. I've never cared about that kind of shit. But it was safety. It was proof that I wasn't failing. Money was how you kept the chaos away. It was how you made sure your kid didn't have to grow up inside uncertainty. Money was how you built a stable home. And after a certain point, I stopped thinking of that as just one priority among many and started thinking of it as the only priority, the one that justified all the others, the one that made the rest of life possible. That's how work takes over your identity, not by being fulfilling, not by being sacred, by being necessary. If a job takes your mornings, your evenings, your energy, your weekends, your body, your attention, it doesn't have to be meaningful to become your whole life. It just has to occupy the space where a life is supposed to exist. It just has to be the thing around which everything else gets arranged. After enough years of that, you stop being a person who works and you become a worker who occasionally gets to be a person. And that's what happened to me. I didn't become a tattooer because it was my divine calling or my desire for some outlaw artistic life. I became a tattooer in the deeper, more dangerous sense. The job swallowed everything. It took up too much room. It became how I measured myself. It became how I justified my absence. It became the proof that I was doing my part. And because I was drinking too much, I had even less left over to resist that. Booze is great at shrinking your world down to whatever lets you avoid yourself for another night. Work does the same thing in a more socially acceptable way. And you put them together, and it's a pretty efficient machine for making years disappear. You work, you drive, you drink, you sleep, wake up, and do it again. Not because you're evil, not because you don't love your family, but because routine can become a kind of anesthesia. And anesthesia is hard to argue with when you're tired all the time. I think that's why the realization hurt so much when it finally came. Not just that I miss things. Everybody misses things. Everybody has regrets. Life is made of them. It hurt because I could suddenly see the whole arrangement for what it was. I had spent years trying to provide a stable life while also being too far away to fully live inside it. And the worst part is, I know I'm not special. I think a lot of people, especially men, get trapped in this. We're taught that love looks like provision. That if you show up financially, that's the main thing, the mature thing, the measurable thing. And I get why. Bills are real. Rent is real. Kids need food, clothes, heat, all the practical shit that keeps life from sliding into chaos. I'm not pretending presence alone pays the electric bill. I know it doesn't. But somewhere along the way, a lot of us get taught to confuse being useful with being present, and we start thinking that because we're working for the people we love, that sacrifice automatically translates into connection. That because we're exhausted on their behalf, they will somehow feel the full shape of our love through those logistics alone. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they feel both. They know you love them, and they also know you weren't really there. Those two things can coexist. And that's what makes it so painful. I know my daughter knows I love her. I know she knows I worked hard. I know she knows I was trying to provide a stable home. I'm not haunted by the idea that none of it mattered. It absolutely mattered. What haunts me is something smaller and harder to define. It's the texture of the life I missed while I was trying to protect it. The mornings I wasn't there, the nights I was too tired, the version of me that might have been more patient if I wasn't drinking. The 1,000 small, forgettable moments that only become priceless after they're gone. That's what I mean when I say time is the real currency. Not in a motivational way, I mean it literally. Time is the one thing you spend that doesn't care why you spent it. It doesn't care that your reasons were good. It doesn't care that the bills were due. It doesn't care that you were depressed or drinking too much or too tired to see clearly. It just keeps going, and once it's gone, it doesn't come back as money or wisdom or perspective. It's just gone. You can earn money back, you can rebuild a career and get sober. You can even repair some relationships. But you can't buy back your daughter at 7 years old. You can't say sorry. I understand now. Can I get one more shot at 2009? You can't go back and decide to be less tired or reclaim all the versions of yourself that were spent just trying to keep the wheels on. That's the cruelty of it. And it's also a lesson. I'm not saying the lesson is never work hard. That's bullshit. Most of us have to work hard. I don't think the lesson is money doesn't matter. I mean, money matters a lot, especially when you don't have enough of it. I don't think the lesson is that we should hate ourselves for not having some perfect answer to a life that doesn't offer one. I don't hate who I was. I was tired. I was trying. I was scared of instability and caring more than I knew how to manage, using work and alcohol to get through it because those were the tools I had. And I'm clearly not a philosopher or some enlightened being with a perfect understanding of work-life balance. I was a middle-of-the-road guy with a family, trying to keep his shit together, pay the bills, and raise a kid while surviving his own mind. And I'm not interested in putting myself on trial, but I do wish I had understood sooner that the whole point of stability is not to consume the life it's supposed to protect. I wish I had understood that you can spend years making a living and still miss huge pieces of your actual life in the process. That usefulness is not the same as love. That just because an arrangement is common doesn't mean it's healthy. And that this is what adults do is one of the most dangerous sentences if you don't ask what the adults are becoming in the process. And I wish more than anything that I'd understood sooner that time doesn't announce itself while it's leaving. It leaves quietly in commutes and work schedules and one more drink and one more late night you swear you'll make up for later. It leaves while you're telling yourself you're doing this for the people you love. Then one day you look up, she's grown. So what do you do with that? I don't know. I don't have some grand resolution. And I don't think there's a clean ending to this story. I can't go back and rearrange my daughter's childhood. I can't undrink those years. I can't untangle every bad trade I made in the name of responsibility and somehow emerge with a version of life where everybody got what they needed and nobody lost anything important. That doesn't exist. All I can say is that I'm glad I provided and still wish I'd been more present. I can say work was necessary and still admit that necessity can become a hiding place if you're not careful. And if there's any value in understanding something too late, maybe it's this. Stop measuring your life only by what you can earn. Start asking different questions. Not just, what does this pay? But what does it cost? Not just, am I providing, but am I actually here? That's the math I didn't know when I was younger. I thought money was the thing that bought freedom. Now I think time is. Time to know the people you love while they're still becoming who they are. Time to actually inhabit your own life instead of just financing it. And maybe that sounds obvious, and maybe it is. Most of the important things don't appear obvious until they passed you by. And I know it's the past. There's no point sitting around fantasizing about alternate timelines where I somehow became a better father, a better husband, a better worker, a better drunk, or just an overall better version of myself. That's not wisdom. That's just nostalgic masochism. But knowing the past can't be changed doesn't make it hurt less. It means you have to learn to carry it, and maybe that's adulthood too. Not closure or redemption, not figuring it all out. Just the willingness to look at your life honestly and admit that some of the things you did out of love came with a big cost. And if I could say one thing to the younger version of me climbing into the car before another drive to Hartford, I think it would be this. Don't confuse paying for a life with living one. Because the money matters, it really does. But by the time I looked up, she was grown. And no paycheck on earth can buy that back. Thanks for listening. This is Slack Signal X.